Good evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real Men, Real Talk, Raw. It is Friday evening here in the United States. It's about just a little bit after 6 p.m. in Southern California, where David Strickel, our guest, is coming in from this evening. And I am coming in from the mountain zone of Scottsdale, Arizona. Good evening, David, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. It's good to be here.
So David and I had the opportunity to connect and spend the last 45 minutes or so getting to know one another a little bit better than we had known each other. Most of our contact was prior, through Messenger, also from me watching some of his David shows. And it's interesting because when we started to talk tonight, I said, I feel like I know you. I feel like I know a lot about you, and I feel like we've connected, yet we hadn't physically connected until tonight. And so I'm excited to have David on. David recently joined the Spirituality Gone Wild channel on Facebook, and he has his own show now. So he's an associate of mine to an extent. And so congratulations. I believe that's just one of a few shows that you have. Is that right?
Yeah, like I said, I'm right now, I kind of say yes to everything. So I have that show. I have my own Facebook page, Abundance Breakthroughs, the Practice of Taya. So I channel the stream every Saturday morning. In fact, this week I'm going to do it Sunday morning, but every Saturday morning, usually I channel live on that Facebook page. And then I also have a podcast and radio show called The Stream of David, and it's syndicated everywhere.
Beautiful. While we're waiting for some people to jump on to the live, welcome to those that join us this evening. I see we got Debbie on. We have Gina Marie. We've got Mr. John Thaddeus Fiore on. And we've got someone on. I don't know his or her name because he says he or she says hello. But I believe it's in Arabic, so I'm not sure what their name is. But welcome to the show. While we're waiting for some people to jump on, David, love to hear. Tell me a little bit about this past week that just is wrapping up as we head into the weekend here in the United States. Tell me about your week. What was your week like?
The week has been mostly good. I had one of my big client breakthroughs for the week is I have somebody in my boot camp program, Taya Boot Camp, that came in trying to avoid having a surgery, which was a removal of a tumor, a cancerous tumor. And she has had a major health breakthrough where she was going to have to go back and have another major surgery to have a skin graft and all of this chemo and all of this stuff done. And I've posted her testimonial video, but it's just miraculous that she has gone back to her doctor, and they have told her that she does not need any more surgery. She's completely healed. The head surgeon said that in 35 years of practice, he's never seen anyone heal the way that she did. And I am not a healer. Our program, though, leads people to their own power, and to see someone that has come into their own power and healed themselves that way is one of the most satisfying things that has happened for me in my spiritual career, and one of the most satisfying things that have happened to me, period, just in being able to help people. So that's very, very exciting. That was a big highlight of the week for her to come back full circle and say, hey, I'm in remission. I'm in great shape now. And she said that she feels worthy for the first time in her life, which is amazing.
How long has she been in your program working with you?
She's been in about 2 months.
And from your perspective, what do you think the difference has been for her to be able to have the testimonial that you just shared, which is so powerful? She has done some significant healing work on a tumor. And those tumors, if it is in the brain, typically they're very difficult to reverse. My understanding.
Yeah, it was a miraculous story for sure.
What's made the difference for her?
I think she got the tools, and she had been a practitioner of the law of attraction. We're all practitioners of the law of attraction, obviously, but she had been really applying manifesting intentionally in her life for a while, but she came into boot camp because she was really frustrated with the results that she was getting. And we take things to sort of a different level in the practice of Taya, of really going deep and forgiving transgressors and really learning how to get our energy up and vibration up and really get our connection with source going, and then setting intentions for the things that we want. And she did all of that stuff. She went into the surgery, didn't have the best experience in the surgery. And then she came out being told that she was going to have more surgeries. And she really she hit her bottom, I think, where it was pretty much, she didn't want to have another surgery. And it was either give up and give in, or sort of bounce back up and go higher and really start to trust and believe. And I think she really got to that point where she decided she was going to trust and believe and hand it over to the universe and allow it to happen. And when she did that and she felt her worthiness of that happening for her, is when the tides turned and she manifested what she wanted. So it's work. It's work for all of us. It's detuning a lifetime of limiting beliefs and self-doubt and self-loathing and all of that stuff that most of us, have to go through. And when you find your path out of that, finally, it's just a whole new life opens up, as we were talking about before the show.
Do you know if she made any changes within her life beyond what you just described, which is really having faith and trust and turning it over? But
the meditation practice, the one thing that she did that is unique is that she said she's always had trouble feeling the energy of source in her. We all talk about Kundalini awakenings and all of this stuff. And she had struggled with feeling the movement of energy in her body. And she uses magnets to get the energy flow and maintain the energy flow in her body. And I should probably have her on sometime. Maybe you should as well, just talking about how she uses these magnets, because I thought it was quite fascinating. And I understand that we have things that are tools, and the tools often have the power that we give to them, but she gave her power to these magnets and they worked. So I think to get the energy flowing, there was something that she did with magnets that I would want her to talk about more than me.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, though.
I would suspect that there's probably a few things that she's got in her back pocket that we may not be aware of in a moment. I know that when I hit my rock bottom, from a medical standpoint, I was willing and desperate to pretty much try anything and everything that was presented to me. And I did some non-traditional holistic work as well, multiple times, multiple modalities. And I continued to explore and open, because I had something like 9 medical diagnoses that I needed to reverse and work on. And so it's just like clipping them off one at a time. But yeah, I'd love to learn more. I actually saw her story on one of your feeds, and I was really intrigued by it. Well, that's a beautiful story. That, I mean, you can't get a better testimonial than that. I mean, that's an amazing story, and I'm excited to learn more about her journey and how she navigates through it. Anything else pop for you this week?
The other thing that popped for me this week is that my marriage is ending, but in a very amicable way. And I've been divorced before, so being able to walk this path from a higher perspective is something that's so much nicer. We're getting along. We're just understanding that we're heading in different directions, and that's okay. And two people aren't necessarily going to vibe together forever anyway. And in this case, we're parting as friends, and I wish him the best. And it's been a very different experience to go through it this way, because I went through it sort of the way most people do before, very contentious, fighting over possessions and just everything else. And that one, we've come full circle from that relationship too. In fact, my first ex took my boot camp program 3 years after we were divorced. We're both married to other people. he actually went through my boot camp. I have a testimonial from him out there too, which is kind of funny.
Wow.
So I just love that I can, have these deep relationships with people, and everybody can, and then get back to a place of friendship, because very often it doesn't happen that way. Very often, people are married and have an intense relationship, and then they become enemies, and that doesn't have to be. You don't have to stay together and stay married and stay in a romantic relationship for the rest of your life, but you certainly don't have to hate each other and have all of this tension and things that you don't work through. It's not healthy for either party. So the down of the week is, yes, we've decided to split. He's moving out on the 18th, but the upside is that we're both handling it very well, and he's significantly younger than I am. I'm very impressed with how well he's handling it. Definitely an old soul.
Well, that's a gift, that you both have been given, that it appears as though what I'm hearing you describe, to paraphrase, you're living in love and kindness, even through the death of a marriage, even through the grieving process, because it doesn't matter who, typically, at least my experience, it doesn't matter who's asking for the divorce. In my case, I left. I asked for it, but I still had to grieve the loss of a relationship. The death of a marriage, and it was the first time that I believe I went through a grieving process in a healthy way, and I think by allowing myself to experience a new way to grieve, it allowed us to walk through the process, coming from love and kindness to our best ability through a very painful time. We had been married for, at that time, we were together 29 years. And by the time the divorce was finished, we were over 30. So, I understand, where you're at, and it doesn't have to be the contentious way that you described it. And it really is a gift when both parties, I know we both know a number of people, I'm sure, besides ourselves, that have gone through it or going through the process right now. And the thing that comes to my mind is I was just speaking with a neighbor of mine who's going through it right now, and I said, no matter however her ex is behaving, it doesn't mean that she's got to get into the boxing ring. She can still choose to come from love and kindness and empathy, and also, to do her best to maintain her dignity and grace through the process, as difficult as it is. And
yeah, I call that, I talk about the spiral a lot, and being up the spiral and positive, or down the spiral and negative. And you're right, you can go up your spiral, and we have the term be the bigger person, and that really detunes, because when you're not arguing and you're not pushing back, it really, the other party has nowhere to go with that. You don't have to participate in that stuff. Exactly. And what I do now is anything that crosses my path that seems like a negative thing, if it's not an obstacle that I can just overcome, especially if it's rooted in someone else's behavior, I ask myself, is this worth me going down into that negative territory over? And to me, nothing is. There's nothing more important than keeping myself up, my energy up, my vibe high, my source connection flowing. And, polarity pulls us down, of course. It's always at play. But that's my work, is to keep myself up there regardless of conditions. Even if something is disappointing or sad or troublesome, I know that I can work my way through it, and all the answers are up in positive. That's where the source connection is. And that's where I want to be most of the time.
Beautiful. I love the way you describe it. For me, it's the three questions that I ask myself, so that I can maintain that high level and not spiral down to the low level of vibration. One is, what is my motive? That's question one. What is my motive? The second question is it good for me? And the third question is, how important is it? And those three questions are like, they're leading the light for me, because when I'm willing to remember to ask myself those three questions, and there's no particular order, but come back with the answer for myself and really, really go within and be honest with myself to answer it, making sure that my motive is coming from pure love and kindness, and there's not an ulterior motive, which is coming from deception or coming from manipulation or wanting control or any of those negative energies and behaviors that we have experienced. Some of us, I know I have, and so those three questions really help remind me, David, of where I need to be in any given moment, in any given emotional situation in communicating and managing my relationships. And so,
it's good when you reach the point of emotional maturity to stop and be able to process like that before you just react. Because I'm and I kind of get that you probably are too. I'm a type A personality, and I used to be very confrontational and very quick to react and just get in somebody's face and not care about the consequences. And gosh, in my 20s, I had a gun and a knife pulled on me just from confrontations, and luckily I survived all that stuff. But, you get a little older and you get a little more mature and you realize that all of that stuff is that ego and that need to push and be the dominant one and be the alpha. That's all rooted in fear. It's fear and insecurity, and for your ego to need to be the bigger person or to be right or to win the argument or to win the fight or whatever it is. It's all fear-based stuff.
How much of that also do you think comes from the masculine versus the feminine side? I mean, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Sure.
Okay, so is it the dominant masculine side of us that what's coming out when we're behaving that way, or is it just the child within that's not getting their way and is having a temper tantrum? I actually asked my neighbor the other night. I said, so the next time, because she's just at the beginning process and so far out of the gate, it's looking like it's going to be pretty challenging of a process. And I said, how old do you think your husband's behaving when he's talking that way or he's treating you that way? And she said, that's a really good question. And she said, I think I know the answer. And I said, and what is that? And she said, he's about 11 years old.
Prepubescent then in behavior. So yeah, I mean, part of it is culture. We're taught that we're supposed to be tough and rough and dominant and in control and in charge and all of this stuff. And then you layer testosterone on top of that. And then you layer a lot of this anger that we don't allow ourselves to deal with on top of that. And it's a volatile cocktail. And I know I had anger and all of my abandonment issues and all of my crap that was just, pushed down. You can't talk about that. We can't, I didn't go to therapy for years. I've never been to therapy, but I took a different path of therapy finally. But, you push all of those emotions and all of that stuff down because you want to be so rough and tough. And then you have all of these triggers. And I can tell you that I was never an unkind person, but I behaved very unkindly in a lot of situations to people. And I always felt like such an ass afterward. I can't tell you how many times I went back and apologized to people in, retail stores and businesses because I would just fly off the handle over the least little thing. And I would get my way and there would be some immediate satisfaction in that I got what I wanted. But then I would start thinking and about how I dealt with it and how I made that other person feel in the process. And, making someone cry, and that's just nasty. It's awful. And at least I feel good in that I regretted it and felt bad about it afterward and would go back and apologize and make amends. But, I got into my 30s and I realized this is stupid. I can't do this. I can't treat people this way. And I can't feel like an idiot every time I fly off the handle and get out of control. And it's not so important to get my way that I'm out behaving like this. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So the acronym for ASS is arrogant, smug, and self-righteous. And I love that acronym because I too, I used to attribute it to growing up in New York. So I blame New York for my behavior. I did that for a long time, David, until one day I woke up and I realized it's not about New York. I got to take accountability for my own behavior. I can't keep blaming it on the Big Apple. I woke up one day and realized, I was that arrogant, smug, and self-righteous guy, especially in business. We all have our stories. We both came from that same fabric. where we were taught how to be business people and how to treat people. At least I was. I don't, and I'm not proud of. I'm not proud of how I behaved
Well,
a
it's
lot of
about
the
winning,
time.
in the corporate world, it's all about winning and coming out on top and, kind of almost always about screwing over the other person. And you're not winning unless you're getting something from them more than what they intended to give. And that's kind of the nature of business in general. So
Yes.
not always the highest vibration for sure.
Yeah, usually not. You know what's really neat though? I don't know about you, but I'm kind of, uh, I have the experience today of having changed my behavior and how I treat people today is very different than how it was. And I don't change because I have to meet a client or do business. I behave today as my authentic self, whether I'm at home or we're doing a show together or I'm in a field, let's say doing a restaurant design has been my field for 37 years. I I work really hard to treat my clients the same way we're in conversation now. And it really does change the vibration of the relationship. Most of my relationships that I have today with my clients are really coming from a different space. And I enjoy it a whole lot more when I do engage with them because I'm coming from loving kindness. And I've never really had any of them come back to me and say, "Hey, what's going on with you, dude? Like, where's the old Jay?" That hasn't happened yet. But I know that on any given day, when I hang up the phone or finish an email or some type of communication through text, I usually feel a whole lot better than I used to.
Well,
It's
you attract the clients into your business that are a vibrational match to you. I used to, I had commissioned salespeople that worked for me for years, and that's was what I did is I would train interior designers to sell furniture on commission to make a lot more money than interior designers typically make. And I made a lot of money doing that all over the United States. And I would tell them that, it is a retail environment. And when you're in retail, you deal with whoever walks through the door. And people can be very nasty in retail. So customers can be very, very nasty in retail situations. Very, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you, or just very nasty and rude, very condescending. And I would teach them that, if you have an idea of what your ideal client or who your ideal client is, you're going to manifest that client. And the most successful people that work for me bought into that, believed it, and did it and lived it. And understand that you are going to attract what you're matched to. And if you're desperate and you're angry or you're, focused on the problems and not the solutions, that's who you're going to get. And if you're focused on having a great experience and a great relationship with people that are going to, give you a scenario of mutual respect, that's who you're going to get. Law of
Yeah,
attraction works everywhere with everything all the time, for sure.
absolutely. No doubt. No doubt. I'd like to take a moment here just to acknowledge some people that are on the show with us live right now. We've got Debbie, we've got Gina, we've got Mr. Fiore Cortez coming in from New Hampshire, I believe. Michael Cameron coming in from Canada. We've got Dolly Blue coming in from the Philippines. Suzanne, I believe, coming in from Michigan, somewhere in the Midwest, Michigan or Indiana. Thank you for being here. Jeremy Melton, we got him coming in, I believe, from Pennsylvania, and he's going to actually be out here on business next week. He and I are going to actually do a business hike this week. We're going to get together coming up next week. I believe on Monday, we're going to spend some time together. We've got Brett Williams coming in from Bali. So we have a global reach, and what a beautiful way to live today. We connect, David, you and I, we're chatting about that, how we connect with people all over the world. I don't know about you, but this week I had conversations, very intimate conversations with a couple of people from Sydney, Australia area. I did a coaching session yesterday with my guest that was on the show with Debbie and I from last week. That was beautiful opportunity to do some additional follow-up work with her. Had conversations from the Philippines, Bali. Brett Williams last night. We did a Zoom. He's going to be on our show Sunday with Debbie and I. Brett Williams. Excited to have him on. But in any event, It's very different today. I love the fact that we don't have to just stay so limited in our relationships just by who we know in the United States anymore. Our reach is there's no limitation, and it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Well, my podcast is really what a lot of my client relationships come from that, and that's all over the world. And right now, I have people in my boot camp. I have someone in Hong Kong. I have someone in Saudi Arabia. I have people in Abu Dhabi. I have people all over the UK, all over Australia. Over half of my client work right now is outside the United States. And so it's interesting, to have all of these different cultures and but we're all the same. We all have the same issues. We all want the same things. And technology has allowed us to come together like never before. And that's really what's causing a lot of this increased vibration. The stream always says, the entity that I channel, that we are collectively ascending to a higher vibration. And it's because we're all coming together now. Like-minded people can come together and start really sharing ideas and experiences. And we're realizing that we don't need all of the old society building stuff, the organized religion and the government and all of that, the parts of it that control us, we don't need. And we can keep any of it that we want and that we like, that works. But we're realizing that, we have this ability to make our own connections and find our own modalities and our own ways of finding our paths to freedom and joy, which is, it all comes down to that. We all want to be free, and we all want to experience joy, and all of the stuff that we think we need and the experiences and the people and all of that. It really is all stepping blocks to us being free and experiencing joy in our lives and manifesting the things that we want.
Ultimately, yeah, we want to feel joy. We want to experience it. We want to love, and we want to be loved. And we just have some challenges on figuring out how to experience it and how to maintain it, how to get it and how to keep it. What I'd like to do right now, David, is invite you, for those of our guests. We got a couple more that just jumped on. Fiore is actually coming in from Jersey Shore. My sister just jumped in from New York. She just came home. She was visiting two of her children and her grandchildren and her son-in-law over in the country of Israel. She just came back last night. I believe she landed in JFK. So welcome back home to the mainland, and thanks for joining the show tonight. David, what I'd like to do is invite you to spend maybe 10 minutes or less, or what you feel comfortable with, maybe giving us a little bit of your background and where you came from, and what life was like for you growing up, and how you got from there to where you are today. Because you have really manifested and transformed yourself into an amazing, beautiful human being today. But I'd like, for those that are not familiar with who you are, to hear a little bit about your backstory, because we all have a story to share.
Sure. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. So the first 6 years of my life were in Houston, Texas, and very middle class, mom and dad, older brother, 2 dogs, house in the suburbs and all of that. I came home one day from playing at age 6, and my father was just gone. And that was a big disruption for me. I'm 50 years old now. I still remember that day like it was yesterday, walking into the house and finding out that my father had left. And my mother, he left it to my mother to tell us. And what she shared was, how I remember it at least, is your father left. He doesn't love you. He doesn't love us. And he's left us for a woman who's a whore that's destroying our family. So that's kind of how my mother laid that on me at age 6. And she fought for custody. She got custody of us. She moved us away. And then she really shut down for the rest of her life. She didn't want to be involved in our lives. She didn't want to be a mother. She just didn't want her ex-husband to have his children. And she had accomplished that. So she retreated to her bedroom for the rest of her life. So my brother and I were really left to our own devices to raise ourselves. And we lived financially below the poverty line, definitely. A roach-infested, little apartment. I hung out at the prostitute's house during the day, or the drug dealer's house during the day. And I was kind of a latchkey kid, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I was just on my own, doing my own thing, and really raised myself. So about age 14, I remember having all of these downloads come to me, these thoughts that just popped into my head from nowhere that were really unusual for a little kid. And I remember telling my brother that if we placed ourselves mentally in the position of having more money, that we would end up having more money. And of course, when you're a poor little kid that's being ignored by your parents, you think money is the answer to everything. You watch the Brady Bunch, they live in this big fancy house. And so my brother thought I was nuts. I signed on to it. And by the time I was in high school, I was driving a brand new car. I was wearing the nicest clothes. I was hanging out with the richest kids in town. I started manifesting material things at a very young age, and that continued. And I'm dyslexic, so I did not do well in school. I actually didn't get past the 10th grade. I went and got the GED to get out of school. Started my own business right after that. At age 19, I was a real estate developer. Did that for a while, got into corporate, worked my way up in corporate, was very successful in corporate. By the time I was 40, I was making a mid-six-figure income, living in a beautiful $1 million plus house, Mercedes, custom suits, European travel, all the stuff that I was supposed to that was supposed to make me happy, right? I had manifested, and I was 100 pounds overweight. I was addicted to Oxycontin. I was in a horrible relationship where neither one of us were happy or functional. We were together for all the wrong reasons. I really didn't like the job that I was in that was paying for all the stuff. I was really stuck and realized that I had all of this information coming to me all of this time. And I'd been told already by psychics that I was a channel and I had this connection and I could share this information. And I really shunned the whole spiritual world. I'd go to psychics in private because I knew there was something going on that I needed to connect with, but I wanted to be a corporate guy. I didn't want to be a weirdo spiritual dude. And so I really kind of kept all of that stuff secret for years. But by the time I hit 40, my life was a disaster. I had all the stuff and I still wasn't happy. So I really set about in my 40s going through this major transformation of losing the 100 pounds, getting into shape, getting off Oxycontin, getting my chronic back pain under control, getting out of the bad relationship, liquidating all the stuff that I knew I didn't need anymore, and finally letting go of the corporate job and coming out of the spiritual closet as a channel and starting to share what I had to share with the world through a podcast at first and through my book after that. And life has just dramatically changed since I've started doing that. And the more that I share, the more information comes forth. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be no end to the new information that I'm able to give to the world. And so now that's my life's mission, is to change the lives of at least 1 million people with this message that I have and with all of the tools that I really misspent up until my 40s. And I spent 10 years figuring all of this stuff out. And now I take what I spent 10 years learning from the stream and I teach it in a program that lasts 8 weeks, and it transforms people's lives in 8 weeks. And that's my work now, is doing that and delivering that information on Facebook and the podcast, on the radio show, wherever I can. I'm, talking about this transformation that I've had and how I did it.
Just for those that may be watching the show that are not familiar with, you refer to the stream. Could you just take a moment to dive into that? And then I want to come back.
A quick 1 minute, what the stream is.
Yeah.
I call it the stream because there is an energetic realm that is beyond the physical. And we all know it. We all know that we're eternal. We all know that when we die, something happens to the wholeness of who we are that is beyond physical. And I used to think, well, maybe that's just our ego wanting to make sense of life and death. But really, we know that we're energetic. We know that our loved ones that pass on, they don't cease to be, they transition to an energetic realm. Well, that energetic realm is just that. It's pure positive energy, and it is the source of all creation. It's what drives all of us. And I have a direct connection to that. Everybody has a connection to it, but I have a connection that is very complex, but I'm able to receive information and channel it for the benefit of others, meaning I can get ideas, thoughts, information, answers to questions that are a more universal nature and share that information out fairly easily, spoken and in writing. And it took me 5+ years to teach myself how to do that, where I could communicate it. but it's been coming to me my whole life. I can think back, I talk about that story when I was 14 in 1982, thinking I invented what we call the law of attraction because I didn't know it had a name. I thought it was something that I just created. But I look back throughout my life, even when I was really, really small, just having a knowing about things that really helped me survive a lot of bad stuff. My father disappearing, my mother retreating, our tumultuous relationship. When I was a teenager at one point, my mother told me to commit suicide. She was that depressed and that disconnected and never dealt with it. And then we finally made amends in my early 20s. And then at 22, I told her I was gay, and she never spoke to me again for the rest of her life, for the next 20 years. So, having to deal, and other people have things like that to deal with as well, but it's guided me through all of that stuff. And I realize now, like I was telling you before the show, that I placed a lot of obstacles in my path from birth that have led me to this place where I now have overcome so much that I can take what I've learned in overcoming all of that and help teach other people, whether I'm channeling directly or indirectly.
How does it feel for you today, like in this moment when I don't know how often you go back and share about your past. I've heard you speak about it a few times, but are you able to go back and walk through this moment with me? Are you aware of how you feel inside when you share your story from your past? That was
when I recall the past, I don't have, I go through a process, and I teach a process of detuning, because everything that has happened up until this moment and everything that will happen beyond this, it's a very simple explanation of quantum physics, but it's just consciousness. It exists as our recollection of it. So everything that's happened in your past is your now recollection of it. That's why you can have two siblings that grow up in the same household and tell almost opposite stories of what their childhood was like, what their parents were like, because they're viewing it from their perspective. So what I do is detune the things from the past to a version that serves my now and my future better. So when I finally figured out how to detune my mother to a point of appreciating her as she was, I suddenly had a connection with her after she passed away in her now state, in what the stream calls her completed state. She's in pure positive energy. She's not the person that she was here on planet Earth with the ego stuff that held her in that prison that she was in. So in my appreciating of her, I had a dream about her where she was younger, thinner, happier. She was in what I know would have been her ideal life, in a big, beautiful home, little dogs running around, beautiful clothes, all the stuff that she liked in life and never had. That was how I was perceiving her now energetic state. So now I choose to remember her that way, because all of that stuff is just my memory of her. So my remembering the version of her that told me to kill myself and told me she hated me and never wanted me and all that crazy stuff, I know now where she was coming from with all that. And it wasn't about me at all. It was about her. So when you ask about my mother, yes, I can recount that story just to tell you where I came from. But if you really ask me to think of my mother, I think of her as she is now, in pure positive and nothing but love. And I know that my dream of her was just my processing how she is now. And that's how I see her. I know that may be very convoluted and complex for people, but when you can detune your past that way, that's when you can finally release the stuff that really triggers you down into negative emotion, the stuff that it's like carrying a weight around when you hang on to stuff from the past. And we all have it. We all have stuff from our past, people, circumstances, or events that are like these weights that we carry around. And when you detune that stuff and release it, you're just lighter and more joyous and more connected. And it's just a much better way to live life.
So let me ask you this, David, just for clarity. The difference between detuning and denial, the difference between detuning and minimizing, or the difference between detuning and revising history. Because is there a fine line between detuning and or what I just described, or is it a different process?
I think there probably is just a fine line, because I do work with people that remember things this way. This is absolutely as it was. and I'm going to stick to that story, and I'm going to live the rest of my life telling this story about how horrible things were and how awful it was. And I will say, well, how is that serving your now, and how is that serving your future to remember it that way? And do you have siblings? Yes, I do. Well, what do the siblings remember? Well, they don't remember any of that. Well, why do you remember that and they don't? You've gotten yourself locked into a story. And yes, maybe your parents beat the crap out of you and you remember that very, very well. But the detuning is not saying, oh, that never happened. It never happened at all. I get that that's not realistic or even useful for most people. It's coming to a state of understanding from a higher perspective where the abuser was and what it was really about for them, that they needed to do that to you. Yeah. Whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, whatever, it's coming to a point of appreciating them for where they were in that time. So that's why I refer to it as detuning it. Okay. You're not really revising it. You're detuning it to look at it. I talk about looking at it from a different angle.
Thank you.
I appreciate shows that are one angle, and suddenly you switch to this camera, it's a different angle. You're switching focus to a different angle.
Thank you for clarifying that for me, because John Fiore just says, you call it detune, I call it forgiveness. That's what he just commented.
Yeah.
And the other thing I heard you say very clearly right now is that when you are able to really have the understanding and acceptance, it's the 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and an action. And all of that falls into empathy for your mom. Understanding what I know today is that I don't believe that there is a human being, especially a parent, that would ever want to intentionally cause harm, pain, wounds, scars, and traumas to their children. And when they are doing it, it's not because they want to hurt them. They don't want to damage them. It's because they themselves are in tremendous pain. And when we're able to have that level of awareness and acceptance that that's why our parents behaved the way they did, it makes it a whole lot easier to then detune, as you say, or go to empathy and forgiveness. That's the work that I had to do to work through all my relationships from my past, where I got hurt, where I was hurt at my core level. And I tell you what, it just changes everything, because when we're living in that space before we go to detune or forgiveness, we are in bondage. And that bondage for me led to what I refer to as the black hole. And I had a black hole my entire life. And as we talked before the show before the show, David, that black hole is what led me to multiple addictions in my life, because I was trying to soften those internal feelings and fill the hole with something. And I didn't know what that something was that was going to work. So I just kept reaching for unhealthy, self-soothing behaviors and tools that were in a form of addictions.
Yeah, and this, we get addicted to everything from alcohol to food to drugs to stuff to, we were talking before the show about there are people that think that they keep thinking money's the answer to everything, and they've got to buy one more house or one more car. I was talking to a guy the other night that had 11 cars at one point. And then he said, having 11 cars was a nightmare because you had to keep the batteries up and you had to store them someplace and you had to do this. And, I love it when rich people complain about, the problems of being rich, but it's true. You start having all of that stuff, and then you have to ask yourself, well, when is it going to be enough? And why do I have this stuff? Is it because I like it and I enjoy it? Or is it because there's just never going to be enough to fill the hole? Whatever it is.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, David. How have you filled your hole? And how has your life changed today? So let's spend some time talking about the work that you're doing. And but before we get there, where are you with your hole?
The period that I described in my 40s was all about finally learning to love myself and really understanding that I didn't have a lot to give anyone else if I didn't love me first. and really have that. I talk about that all the time. In fact, right now in December, I'm doing a love you challenge, meaning a love yourself challenge, to really spend time every day just appreciating multiple aspects about you and see how the world treats you differently. Because when you start really loving yourself, the world starts giving it back to you via the law of attraction, like everything else. And it's just so powerful. I tell a story about just this week when an aspect of my pending divorce came up, and it really got me down for a minute, and I had to go do some shopping, and I got in my car, and I always do this exercise where I set my intention for a safe and stress-free drive, or I'd set my intention for a great interview or a great meeting. I set intentions habitually now for everything. And I set that positive intention, and I went to breakfast. I had the nicest server you could ever have. I dropped off dry cleaning. The lady at the dry cleaners was so friendly and so nice. And I'm in Southern California, which is not exactly like being in the South where everybody just, pours kindness over you all the time. Yeah. And then I went to Ralph's, and I'm walking around the supermarket, pushing the cart, just thinking about how joyous I was. I just felt so good. And I did a boot camp call with my clients that day. And I said, I promise you, while I was doing that, there's somebody sitting right now at a 5-star resort complaining and nitpicking about something and miserable about something. And I know that's true because I've been that person in the past, that person that goes on the expensive vacation and made myself miserable because I put so much pressure on having a good time that I couldn't have a good time. I made you see people do that with weddings and in big events and travel and stuff. I don't live my life like that anymore. So that's a big change.
That's expectations. Those are the expectations that we set for ourselves and we set for everyone else in our path.
Yeah. And when you start really needing other people to behave in a specific way, whether it's loving you or just whatever that is, if you need that to feel good about yourself, then you're always at the mercy of what's going on around you, and you're always at the mercy of other people. And the nice thing about going up and just loving yourself first and getting your source connection really established, which is how you do that. Because if source is just love, that's how you make the connection, is by loving you. And in religion, very often we're taught not to worry about yourself and to put yourself last and be humble and love God and love a higher power and give all your power to that. But no matter what your beliefs are, if you don't love yourself, how are you making that connection to the higher power, source, your stream, whatever you want to call it? You're not, because you know that connection is love. So you've got to love yourself.
Yes.
You learn to do that first. Everything else comes into place.
David, I feel like I'm dancing with you right now. I feel like I'm holding you. You are speaking my language. I spent 54 years of my life. I had no idea what loving myself felt like. I had no idea what it could feel like. I'd never experienced it. And even sadder than that is that I thought that I was loving everybody else that was important in my life in a healthy way. And I come to find out that I wasn't even loving the people that I cared about in a healthy way. I was actually hurting them. Because what I didn't know was, I didn't know what I didn't know. And what I didn't know is that it had to start with me first. I had to learn how to first like myself before I could love myself. And then once how I got there, the gateway for that was self-care. The gateway to learn how to care about myself was through self-care, how to love myself. And once I started to experience that, it was the game changer. It changed everything in my life. And I love listening to you speak, because my God, you're speaking the language that I experience every day in my life now. It doesn't mean that life is perfect. We still have relationship challenges with people. It doesn't mean that every relationship is just absolutely nirvana. But when you set the intention, when you walk into Ralph's, or you set the intention just for today, how you're going to behave, and you put yourself out there differently than you had in the past, it changes almost every experience that you touch in the moment, right?
Yeah, and then you get really, I hate to use the term addiction because of what we've already talked about, but you get addicted to that, though. You get addicted to that source connection, and that's the best addiction you can have, and that loving yourself state, because you have so much more to offer the world in that state. I mean, just I just think about how joyful I was and how kind I was to the people. This girl was mopping the floor and she kept saying, excuse me. And we kind of laughed every time I was down an aisle and she's mopping the floor. And, I would imagine working in an environment like that, there's plenty of people that probably roll their eyes at the person mopping the floor, and so I had all these just joyous connections. It's something very simple and mundane, like going to the supermarket. But if you think about it, that's what a happy life is. It's not about going on multiple 5-star vacations, which are fine, but it's about enjoying the everyday, day-to-day things that you do, not having to save up and go on some grand vacation because you hate your life so much. It's enjoying the life you have, and then realizing that once you do that, life opens up and then more things to enjoy flow in.
Yes. David, I love you. I do, man. I mean, you're speaking my language, it's just amazing. John Fiore, this is something I think I said to you before the show, David, is that the difference between you and I believe, is that I had to hit a rock bottom, and, we all have a different rock bottom. My rock bottom was my disease turned into disease. I had to get very sick. And a heart attack at age 48, I wasn't sick enough. I had to get way sicker. I had to have more diagnoses on top of that by 54. Fiore says the same thing. He had to physically get sick and nearly die to have his awakening and realize that he was chasing all the wrong things, as were you and I. And the blessing that you had is, my understanding is that you didn't have that significant medical diagnosis that nearly took you out. You may have been really close.
I was pushing 300 pounds, and I was on medication for, blood pressure and cholesterol and all that stuff for sure.
You were heading there,
getting out of breath, walking across the house, all that. Okay.
Yeah. But you were given a gift. You didn't have to hit that bottom like John Fiore and I did. I'd love to spend a little bit more time on, what you're describing in the grocery store, the difference between going down aisle 3 and aisle 11, which was nothing changed, except that the groceries on the shelf changed, but your perspective and your interaction and the love you showed to the employees didn't waver. That stayed. Well, what you're describing, I believe, is what the definition of law of attraction is. Can you spend a little bit of time just sharing on that right now for those that may not be familiar with what that means?
Certainly. Well, it's a lot of people consider it a pseudoscience, but there's evidence of it everywhere. You can look at your life, or it's easier to look at other people's lives, actually, people that you work with, your family members, and you can see that their lives are a culmination of what they're thinking, what they're putting out. And very often we speak what we're thinking. And you can hear by the way people talk about themselves and their jobs and their families and their world in general, what their general vibration is. And then you can look at their life and see their life as a reflection of their general vibration. What they're putting out, they're getting back. As much as quickly as getting in the car and having a safe and stress-free drive to Ralph's and a lovely time walking around Ralph's, you can manifest that quickly. You can also manifest your income, your health, your relationships. You manifest all of it. I shouldn't say you can, you do. You manifest all of it. The problem is that people mostly run into is that we make certain things big. A drive to Ralph's and a shopping trip, that's easy. That's so easy to manifest. Oh, but money, that's a tough thing to manifest. It's so hard to make money. There's so many people out to get you. It's your employer doesn't want to pay you. Taxes are so high. Rent is so expensive. The cost of living is going up. You turn on the news and the stock market's down, and money is just so tough. That's the song we sing, and therefore we manifest it in our lives. Yet you hear wealthy people, the friend that I was telling you about that has the 11 cars, he made a statement the other night that his parents wanted him to sell the house that they were living in. And he said, I think I could get $500,000 for it. And I need another $500,000, like I need a hole in my head. Because his vibration is, I'm rich, money is easy. I'm so tired of money just pouring in. Every time I invest in something, it takes off. He's just a Midas touch with money because that's his vibration. Most people aren't like that with money. The same thing goes with health. My vibration generally, even though I was 100 pounds overweight, was I was healthy. That's one thing my parents did not instill in me. They were both kind of vibrationally healthy people. They weren't unhealthy other than maybe mentally. And so I didn't grow up, thinking about sickness or illness. I didn't grow up going to the doctor. I didn't grow up taking medication. It just wasn't part of my existence. And to this day, I hardly go to the doctor. I hardly take medication for anything. I don't have any prescription drugs right now. I just don't think of any of that stuff. I've never been in the hospital. I've never had surgery. Generally healthy, other than the fact that I was 100 pounds overweight for a good 15 plus years. So you attract what you generally think about, and you generally think about what you believe, and your beliefs are very much rooted in your upbringing, in the sum of your life. So your life is a result of the signal that you're sending out, what you're thinking most of the time. So we get caught in these cycles of responding to current conditions. And your current conditions are a reflection of what you've previously thought. That's why you stay in a cycle. You think, oh gosh, I get this law of attraction thing. I'm going to start thinking that I'm rich. I'm going to start thinking like David's friend that just doesn't want that extra $500,000 because he has too much money as it is. I'm going to start thinking like that. And then you start getting yourself and practicing and getting in that mindset. But then the bills show up, or the paycheck shows up, and it's not what you want it to be. And you start sort of going down your spiral, as we say, about money. Well, I tried to get into that rich guy mindset, but here's this bill and here's that bill, and Christmas is coming, and how am I going to pay for this? And the electric bill was twice what I thought it was going to be. Boom, boom, boom. You're right back down in that vibration of not enough. So to break any of these cycles, you've got to get some tools and some practices in that get you thinking differently than what is, and doing it consistently so that you're detuning and retraining your thought process to something that's different than what has always been. And it's not easy, but it's absolutely possible. That's what my Taya boot camp, I say it closes the gap on the law of attraction. And Taya is TYA. It simply stands for trusting your abundance, because really it all comes down to trust. Trusting that the universe is going to deliver everything that you need and want. Trusting that you're going to be able to manifest the things that you want in your life. It really comes down to trust, because what happens is you open the bills and you stop trusting. Yeah, I felt great a minute ago about money, but here's this bill that I wasn't expecting, and now I'm stressed out. And you're not trusting in that moment. If you can just find your path to trusting about your health, about your money, about your relationships, about your overall happiness, about your ability to manifest freedom and joy, if you can teach yourself to trust, then the tides turn and suddenly your manifestations change and your life starts to change. And I've got evidence of that in my course. I've got evidence of that of people that get in a few weeks that are 45, 50 years old plus, that change a lifetime of limiting beliefs by doing the work that we teach. And it's intense. It's work. And I tell people it's an intensive thing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of self-exploration. There's a lot of journaling and meditation and a lot of things that you do. But if you're going to change who you are, really, how you're programmed, you've got to put some work in, and you've got to really want it, because it's not something that's easy to do. But the people that join are the ones that I know are really ready to make the big changes and have a big breakthrough in their lives. I used to call it abundance breakthroughs. But the practice of Taya, it's about so much more than just learning how to manifest stuff. In fact, what I want to do is I want to get my clients to the point where they could care less about the stuff, that it really is about the joy and the connection. And then the stuff's the bonus. Yeah, you can have all the stuff you want, but learning how to get that joyous connection going and manifesting those little moments, those little shopping trips at Ralph, and stringing those along and realizing that, wow, I'm suddenly having this happy life. Oh, and by the way, my business improved. I got more money. I've got more money coming in. My health is better now. Health is a big one. You can have all the money in the world, and as you know, if you're not healthy, it doesn't matter. Steve Jobs was a genius, right? Everybody thinks he was this genius, and he was super rich and had the world at his feet. And he was dead at 54. So all the money in the world doesn't buy health. There's that, and all of these health issues start with stress.
The same way. Paul Allen just passed away like last month or so. He was co-founder of Microsoft.
Oh yeah, I used to live in Seattle, so I know very well
Yeah.
that name. I used to live right in the middle of a neighborhood that he built from scratch. That was incredible.
You know what I'm feeling right now is I've got a number of avenues, paths I'd love to go down and chat with you about further. There's so much more in depth I'd love to explore. Um, I think we can continue this conversation on another evening, another Friday night. Um, I don't think this is a one-time gig here. I'd love to have you back, David, because you bring such value to people's life. You're a teacher, you're a mentor, and you have such knowledge and understanding of how people can improve their lives, how they can shift their negative spiral energy into something very healthy and positive. And just right off the bat, two things that come to mind is one is how do we teach, or how do we get the younger generation understanding what we're talking about here? How do we get them to shift from their negative mindset into something positive? And that, we could talk about that for some time. And that alone is so valuable, because many of us have children that are in their 20s and or younger. And how do we, especially in their 20s, when the kids maybe are out of the house and we can't really influence them the way we could when they were younger. How do we help bring the next generation along as teachers and mentors? And so that's just a topic that I'd love to dive into.
Yeah, I would love to. And just a quick little 2-minute and 1-minute anecdote. So all of this, my program started a year ago because my husband is a lot younger than me. He's 25, and his sister at 16, and she's told this story publicly. She shared it publicly, so I can reshare it. She had been sexually abused for 10 years. And the abuser was starting up again at 16, and we found out about it, and she moved in with us. And I spent a year working with her as a parental figure. And I've never had children before, but I spent a year working with her to detune what happened to her and give her greater confidence so that she would never manifest something like nature again, because there was a lot of fear when she came to live with us. So it was a very interesting experience and a very transformative experience. And she went back home a much stronger, more confident person, saying, I am never going to allow anything like that to happen to me again, with a very high vibrational perspective for the perpetrator, but also understanding that she does not have to engage in that or engage with that person, but that level of forgiveness that she was able to reach at 17, she was a year older by the time she got there. But that's really what started this whole thing. So we could do a whole hour just on that for sure. Amazing transformation with her.
I'd like that. That would mean a lot to me, because I have, of course, I've got my own personal vested interest in this topic, not only for the next generation, but for all of us. I mean, I've got a whole circle of friends, as I'm sure you do, that are not manifesting at a high level. They're still manifesting at a low level. And how can we help influence them and not try to fix them? Because see, there's a big difference between trying to fix people and save them, as opposed to, how can we help influence or inspire them to be willing to show up. And what you described is, you said how hard it is. That's called having to unlearn the limited belief systems. That's the work I had to be willing to do if I wanted to live. And not just live, but I wanted to live, and I wanted to tear out that black hole that was in my soul for 54 years of my life. And through the work that I did, which took tremendous courage, I no longer have that black hole in my soul. And most days I manifest a very high level, high spiraling vibration. And it's a beautiful way to live today. And so it's possible, David. I'm one of those people you described, and I believe you were one of those people at some point in your life. And so I do want to invite you to maybe just give maybe some closing thoughts. But before we go there, how can people get a hold of David Strickel? If they want
My
to
website is thestreamofdavid.com. Everything the channeled entity is the stream, and so everything that I do is the stream of David. So thestreamofdavid.com is my website. That's the hub for everything that I do. And I also have a Facebook group called Abundance Breakthroughs, the practice of Taya, TYA, for trusting your abundance. You can join my private Facebook group. And I'm in there. I channel in there every week on the weekends. And then I'm in there doing live videos a couple of times a week and posting in there every single day. Very active in that group. And then my boot camp is Taya Boot Camp. And I actually posted a compilation of testimonials in Spirituality Gone Wild right before we got on. It took a long time to get it done. So I was down to the wire getting that posted, but that's running right now on Spirituality Gone Wild. But the best way to get in touch with me is through the website, or you can even email me at david@thestreamofdavid.com. And I take email questions, requests for podcasts and things like that. The podcast is also The Stream of David. So Google The Stream of David, it's all there. But the website is the hub for everything.
And you're also a published author. You have a book called The Stream.
I do, and I should have. I really always shamelessly self-promoting, but my book is The Stream: Eternal Wisdom for a Better Life. It's available at Amazon, and it's an introduction, a little bit of me and how I came to channel the stream, a much more in-depth version of that than what you got tonight, and then a whole lot of channeled writing, including 23 core messages from Source that answer a lot of the questions. If you could sit down and just speak directly to Source, we answer a lot of those questions in this book. Why we're here, what our purpose is, reincarnation, life on other planets, all of that stuff is in this book.
Thank you for sharing that, David. And if you could just take a moment here just to maybe wrap up and summarize your takeaways, your thoughts from our show this evening, and take us out.
Certainly. I certainly appreciate you having me on. I love hearing your story and your journey, and we're obviously vibrationally aligned to be able to have this type of conversation when we really haven't spoken before. So it's really cool to just get on and vibe with somebody. I always say that's my favorite thing in life, is when you meet somebody that you just vibrationally match with. You just feel like you've known them forever. That is better than any luxury vacation or meal or anything, when you just vibe with somebody else. I really, really appreciate that. And I thank you for having me on. I look forward for the opportunity to come back.
Thank you so much. It means so much to me when I too can connect with someone. And we've all had those moments. We've all experienced it. Even when we're low in vibration, we experience that too. You know, we connect with people that may not be healthy for us or serve us well. But it's such a beautiful experience when I'm able to connect with people, and it's all about seasons. Some seasons are really short. You know, it's like we connect, and I know I'm never probably going to see him again. But others that I know that we're going to continue to have a relationship that continues to evolve and mature together and grow. And I'm excited to have you back. There's so many things, so many areas that I'd love to dive in with you and hear your perspective on healthy living and healthy loving. And with that, I'm just going to wrap up by saying thank you so much for joining me tonight. Welcome to the Spirituality Gone Wild channel. And for those of you that haven't caught David live, he mentioned it tonight. He's got a couple of different shows, a couple of different ways you could reach him. And that's a wrap for tonight. This Sunday, we have Real People, Real Stories, Raw with Debbie and myself. I'll be posting. Brett Williams is going to be our special guest coming in live from Bali for that show. So that'll be Sunday, late afternoon on the East Coast and early evening. And so with that, David, thank you for joining us this evening, and have a beautiful week, and take some time for some self-care and self-love.
Will do. Thank you so much, Jay. Good night, everybody.